Hi folks, and welcome to Mastering in the Box. In today's video I'm going to break down a mastering session that I've done recently featuring a breakbeat style song. Hello and welcome to Mastering in the Box. I'm your host Smudge, and in today's video we're going to break down a recent track that I mastered, which is in the breakbeat style. I'm going to show you through some of the plugins and some of the techniques that I used to master this particular track. But before we get into the content of today's video, if you do want to know more about digital mastering, then make sure you hit that subscribe button below and make sure you tick that bell and select all to receive notifications in all of our videos moving forward. So the track we're featuring in this week's video is the track called Funkin' Bass by Stuart over at ATG Records, and this was such a fun project to work on. The tracks themselves, there were 19 tracks in total, and they were all recorded onto DAT and mini disc, and they were recorded back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and due to family commitments they are now just seeing the light of day, and we're just bringing these to life. And as part of the process we had to get the DATs and mini discs converted into digital format, but due to the technology these were recorded 16-bit 44.1, so we had to be a little bit careful with the lesser headroom that we get from a 24-bit or 32-bit float file. But needless to say, these were great tracks. They were well written, well produced by Stuart, and well mixed. So let's play a brief bit of the track now. I'm going to bypass the effects chain. All of the individual effects are bypassed, and let's take a brief listen. So first things first, when I spoke to the client after getting the digital tracks back, we spoke about some expectations, and to be fair, this was pretty much kind of like a free rein in terms of we just wanted to kind of get the tracks up to a competitive level, competitive loudness, but the rest of it was kind of just making some mere enhancements. There was no particular reference that we were aiming for. It was just trying to just enhance particular elements of the song. So we had kind of the goal was to kind of get it to compete in terms of digital distribution, and you know, if the client wanted to put some of the tracks through Beatport, we needed to get it to a commercial loudness there. Through Beatport, I took a listen to quite a lot of the different tracks, and they were averaging somewhere between -8 and -12 LUFS on an integrated level. So I knew they would have to be relatively loud to get them to compete. But this is also a great example. When people say to me, what is my default mastering chain? The answer is quite simple. I don't have one. I don't really believe in having a preset or a default list of plugins that I should use. I only use what the song needs. So I don't have any presets or any defaults that are put into my mastering chain. I will literally just use what I feel that I need to use to enhance the song. In this particular example, I use the ELYSIA Alpha Master Compressor by Brainworks, the TR5 Equal EQ through IK Multimedia. I used the Rear X Comp multiband because I just wanted to add a little bit of multiband compression on the low end, and I used the TR5 Stealth Limiter once again by IK Multimedia. So let's get into these stages stage by stage. So stage number one, in this particular example, I actually went for limiter first, and I've been really getting into the habit of trying to get the track up to some form of commercial loudness first, because it allows us to do quite a few things. It will allow us to compare any changes we make through our other processing plugins, at the level in which we want them to translate. So that's one thing. So once you've got it up to a relative commercial loudness, at least you can start to hear how it will translate once you render and once you send it out. I know there's going to be slight variances with the upload process, etc., and there is potential for a little bit of gain to be applied in that process. But one thing we're not going to do is going to start adding a load of volume at the end of the processing. We're doing it first, so any changes we make, we can get a real good comparison up front. And the other reason, by using a limiter, is don't forget a limiter is a compressor, and if we're using a limiter to get some overall volume, and if we're then applying the gain reduction using the limiter, it could well be that if we start to apply too much reduction, or we're quite happy with the overall compression that limiter is giving, we may not then need to use a mastering compressor. So I've really got into the habit of using the limiter first, and I've been getting some really good results. So a very typical setting, output ceiling -1. So the ceiling of -1 dB, because this is very much going to be for digital release. And it was basically a case of then using the volume meters on the monitor effects, and yeah, basically boosting the volume into it. Well, the thing with limiting, I don't like to use too much kind of compression with the limiter. I like just to do a relatively clean volume boost and trying to minimise the gain reduction. I don't use any threshold. With this particular plugin, there's no predefined threshold that I need to adjust, but it's very much kind of just using the limiter to boost the overall level and just kind of control some of the dynamic range at that point. So let's take a look. Let's use the TR5 by IK Multimedia. I love this particular loudness meter. Let's move the plugin down here and let's take a brief listen. Let's take the limiter out first and let's put the limiter in so you can get an idea of the volume addition. Okay, good rule of thumb when you're using any limiter is to get your LUFS integrated reading. You would need to play the track through for the entirety, because if you don't, you won't get an accurate measurement. But one thing you can do is, once you instigate the limiter, is have a look at your momentary, just to kind of give you a rough idea as to where the LUFS is at that moment in time, because that will give you a good indicator as to where you need to be with your input to boost it to get your overall loudness. So that's just a good rule of thumb there. Take a look at the momentary as well, because that can really help you indicate where your end loudness will be roughly. So once again, limiter's now been input, 2.7 dB boosting now, and we're at a ceiling of -1. So let's take another listen. So we're not going crazy here. As I say, just a nice little bit of volume just to push it more up to a commercial standard. And I just felt it was nice and comfortable at this stage. Not doing too much with the gain reduction. Let's take another look here. About 2 dBs worth of gain reduction, so it's nothing excessive here. I'm just trying to get that nice volume boost into the track to kind of give it some oomph to start with, and then we can take a look at some of the other processing after the limiting has been done. So next up, let's take a look at the ELYSIA Alpha Master Compressor. I don't always apply a mastering compressor on every single track, but for a particular style of music that we've got here, I just felt that it's quite a dynamic track, and I just really wanted to try and get a little bit more consistency with some of the dynamics. So that was one thing. But the other thing about applying an overall mastering compressor is it can often add that element of warmth, because it's going to raise and apply a more consistent low end and those low mids. And I do find that using a mastering compressor can sometimes make a track more warm because it really kind of controls that low end and those low mids and kind of gives it more roundedness really. The thing I like about a mastering compressor also is you can choose low ratios, and this particular example it's around 1.6 to 1, so it's a very gentle ratio. We've got quite a slow release and a fast attack, and by using a fast attack and a slow release, this gives us a real kind of natural compression because it's going to clamp down relatively quickly on the transients, but it's not going to release them too quickly, so you're not going to start getting a load of pumping. And the threshold was just basically bringing the threshold down to taste just to get a little bit of gain reduction. Wasn't thinking anything too bad here. Once again, just around between 1 and 2 dBs worth of gain reduction, mixed with 100. A bit of makeup gain, 1.5 dB, and there's no soft clipping applied. So it's in bypass at the moment. Let's take another listen, and then we'll clip the mastering compressor in, and we can do a before and after. So it's very subtle, it's just giving some more cohesion, some more consistency with some of the dynamics there. One of the things I noticed with these tracks is there wasn't a great deal of stereo information, so we haven't got some like big wide panning, so it's very much kind of more, probably not necessarily mono, but it's very much kind of centered rather than too wide. So there wasn't really kind of anything too funky in terms of, you know, some real kind of high-end control we needed, because it was very much kind of centered. There's no real kind of wide stereo image, so just by using the mastering compressor just kind of gives us a little bit more consistency. So next in line we have the TR5 Equal plugin by IK Multimedia. This is one of my favourite EQs. You can do so much with it, just standard stereo, or you can do mid and side, and you can do just, you know, peak or bell notches, or you can do high filters, low filters, high pass, low pass, lots of different things that you can do with this particular plugin, which is great. And some of the things with this, I really tried not to kind of do too much, but there was a couple of areas I just wanted to kind of boost. As I said, it was not really a great deal of stereo width with this particular track, so I didn't really need to kind of do too much from my mid-side perspective, but I did just feel that it kind of just needed a bit of a bump in the low end, and almost just kind of a bit of top end as well. It's not quite like a smiley face curve, but it's that kind of thing, just boosting the lows and the highs, kind of give it a little bit more roundness, just giving it that more warmth in the low ends. And there was just a little bit of a notch out here at around 666 Hz, just 1.1 dB, and, you know, a relatively wide Q here. And then, as I say, we've got the it's a low shelf, 1.8 dB at 94 Hz. I probably wouldn't generally go quite as high as 94, but with this particular track I felt I could push it a little bit more. And then we got kind of a high boost here as well, 8.2k, once again 1.9 dB, so we're not doing anything drastic here. It's just kind of giving a little bit more depth and definition to the lows and highs, and just taking a little bit out of that kind of nasal frequency range around 656 Hz. So let's take a listen before, and then we'll engage the plugin and take a listen after. So it's subtle once again, and the thing I really like about mastering is when you start doing this in stages, you start to add a little bit of compression to start with, then a little bit of EQ, and then we're going to add a little bit of multiband compression in a minute, and just each of those 3 stages just build up slowly to kind of give quite a drastic change to a degree where it really enhances that track a little bit more. So let's take both of these plugins here, let's take these out of the equation for a second, and then let's play the track, and I'm going to put both plugins back in, and let's do a before and after comparison. is really just about adding that body and weight to the track. Yes, I really like where the tracks were already. I didn't want to do anything too drastic, but just felt it needed a little bit more body, a little bit more weight to the low end and the low mids to kind of give it that little bit more oomph. These are very kind of energetic songs, and I think they were just lacking almost kind of that little bit of low end definition to kind of really kind of give it that body and that oomph that the tracks desired. So let's go on to the next stage, which is the multi-band compressor. And last up in the chain here we have the multi-band compressor, and I'm using the trusty Rear X Comp. A lot of people don't like using this. I love it. I just think this is such a great tool to use. I've bypassed most of the bands, so there's 4 bands in this particular example. Bands 2, 3 and 4 I bypassed. I don't need them. All I wanted to do with this is kind of give it a little bit more weight and a bit more consistency in the low end. And one of the things that I find is by adding a little bit of multi-band compression just on the lows. So in this example, it's just from 0 to 151 Hertz. If you've got a lot of body with the peak only, but the rest of the sound is kind of sloping off volume, by using a compressor, you're effectively reducing the peak, but you're raising the quieter bits. And if you've got a lot of body in the quieter part of the sound, actually by using compression in that low end on the multiband can kind of raise that and can also give more body and warmth to the overall track. And that's just the thing with this particular track. It's more about just adding body and warmth and a little bit of top end, nothing more. Outside of that, we've got a small EQ dip around 650 Hertz, but that's all we're doing, is giving that extra warmth to that low end and a little bit of EQ on the high. So the multi-band is bypassed in bands 2, 3 and 4. We've got the low band active only, and as I say, frequency wise 0 to 151 Hertz. Ratio I've left it 2 to 1 to keep it nice and subtle. The attack is relatively quick, but the release is also quick in this instance, because I really want to kind of get that more that body and that roundiness and kind of give it some more oomph. And then the threshold is just bringing the threshold down just to apply a little bit of gain reduction to taste. I've got auto makeup gain engaged here, just adding a little bit of the volume that we've taken away, but it's all just to give the track some additional body. So let's bypass it, let's play it, and let's introduce the multi-band compressor. So it's really kind of giving that extra body and warmth to that overall track. This is very much kind of, say, driven by that low end, driven by those bass frequencies. There's not much going on in the stereo field, so those mono frequencies really need to be kind of strong and punchy, and that low end really want to kind of get that drive in. And just by using that multi-band compressor there is really kind of, say, pushing the song along. So let's just take another brief listen. Okay, and now I'm going to get the first 3 plugins. Let's bypass them all, and then what I want to do is play it. I'll introduce all 3 plugins, and then we can just take a listen to compare with all 3 plugins in and out, just so we can get a real good comparison. So there we have it. So that's it for this week's video, and it's a relatively short one, but I really wanted to kind of show you guys this example, because the thing with mastering is sometimes it's just as important to showcase what you don't do compared to what you do. And I think that there's this trend with mastering now, and I hear people talking about these mastering chains they have, and yeah, I got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plugins in my mastering chain. You don't need it. You really don't need it. Be very intentional with what you're doing. With this particular example, it was really kind of emphasizing that low end, give it some warmth and more definition. We've done, we've used a mastery compressor to kind of give some overall consistency with the dynamics. We've then used the EQ to give a small boost to the low end and the high end, just to kind of give it almost kind of that top end sheen, as well as some more body to the body to the low end. We've taken a little bit out of 650 hertz. We've used the multi-band compressor just to compress the low end, kind of give it that more roundness and body. That's it. And then we've used the limiter to kind of bring up the overall volume. You don't need to go into these things with 10, 12 plugins, because it's just not needed. Be very intentional with what you do and have a clear game plan of what you want to try and achieve. I would really recommend to anyone who wants to try mastering, don't go in with a preset chain. Just try start from a blank template and just go from there, and be very intentional with what you want to do. So I hope you found this useful. If you are using any of these tips and techniques from this video or some of the other videos, please let me know in the comments down below as to how you're getting on with them. How are you using them? Have you found any challenges, or if you're particularly with your mastering, have you found something that you're not particularly sure and you want some kind of assistance with? I'm really keen to kind of make this channel as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions at all, or if you use any of these techniques or these plugins, let me know in the comments down below, because I'll be really keen to kind of understand how you guys are getting on with your mastering and how you're using some of these tips and techniques. So once again, I hope you found it useful. If you have found it useful, give the video a thumbs up, and as I say before, if you do want to know more about digital mastering, hit that subscribe button below and make sure you tick that bell to receive notifications and all of the videos moving forward. So all that's left for me to say is I hope you'll keep safe and well, and I'll see you in the next video coming real soon.